It's fantastic, JP. It really, really needs to be brought to the big screen. Everyone that I've recommended it to has said that, and yeah, they're like, this needs to be like seen in person. I was like, I absolutely agree because this is fantastic. I read a lot of the Brawl books, but none of them disturbed me as much as this one did. Like, this could really happen. Like, this is so realistic. This could really happen.
Honestly, a lot of it has happened. So when I was doing the research for it, I based it a lot on things that have actually happened in real life. So like it's an amalgamation of a lot of different legit stories of things that people have done, things that have happened, all of it. Literally almost everything in that book is based in reality to a degree.
I think it is fantastic. I've met so many moms who are overly attached, to, their kids. You get that weird, attachment. Then you get the kids who do behave questionably, which is really scary for a parent. That's
Yeah.
very, common. It is, I, my favorite part, honestly, was the fact that the massive twist came earlier on in the book. That was like the most unique thing about it to me, because normally it's you get to the end, you're like the last chapter and a half, then the twist happens. That yours is like right off the bat, and I love that. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, the funny thing is I was actually when I went to Yale, we were talking about this. As a new writer that no one's ever heard of, it's really hard to get people to it's really hard to get a new reader in and to accept you as a writer. It's hold on one second. The link you posted earlier
Are
was
any
the incorrect
comments?
link. Anyway, so there we go.
Uh,
So anyway, the the trick is like as a new writer, people don't really want to give you a lot of time. You have to catch them quick, and honestly, there were a lot of different beginnings to the book, but the book starts kind of right at that moment. That's the inciting incident. That gets you right in there. That gets you starting to ask the questions of, um, what the heck is going on? What is going on in this world? And it immediately invests you in the story, and you immediately go, okay, you've got Wanda, you've got her husband who's probably non-responsive, you've got this innocent child that she obviously loves, and you have the older child who she's worried about. But then as the story goes on, one third of the way through, everything gets flipped on its head, and you realize, oh wait, there's some craziness going on. So that's really the part that you need to. Haha, Tara found us. Um, that's the that's the
Yay!
thing
Oh my
that
god!
really that's where the book kind of starts. Really, is where I flip everything on the head, and I really like doing that. I like taking the story to a point where you think you know where it's going, and then I take it and just wrench it in a different direction immediately. And that was kind
Yeah,
of, I think, what brought it. And when you mentioned moms and stuff, I've noticed that the vast majority of my 5-star reviews come from parents. And a vast majority of my 1-star reviews and people who didn't really like it come from non parents.
that I can absolutely understand that, because as a parent myself with two kids, I have three kids, but I have an older boy and I've got two younger girls, and you know, as a mom, that attachment to your children, that I mean, it tugs at your heartstrings, and the idea of one of your children hurting the other one, and lashing out, like, at what point does that instinct to protect one over the other kick in? And that was such a pivotal moment in the bedroom,
Mm-hmm.
um with yeah, that hit me huge, JP. Like, that was, my mouth dropped open, and I'm like, what would I do? I think as a mom, a lot of us read that scene going, holy shit, what would we do,
Mm-hmm.
in that circumstance? What would you do? You find one of your children hurting the other one.
Yeah. And that was, and that, yeah, I mean, the book comes from that point of view of, like I said before, when I had my first kid, I'm holding this baby in my hands, and you look down at this child and you go, I would burn the world for you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you immediately like, and then in my brain, my writer brain, I go, what would my kid have to do in order for me to, I don't know, shift that? And how far would my kid have to go, and how horrific would my kid's um, things have to be, or his actions have to be, before I kind of draw the line? And that's kind of where the story came out of, and then pulling in a lot of different information as I went. Um, a lot of the stuff in there, some
It
of
did
it's literally
remind me.
pulled from like World War II human experimentation that was done during World War II in the concentration camps.
Who was your favorite character to write? Because they all had such amazing detail to each of them, to where you felt like, they each had a personality, even as the smaller characters like the taxidermist, Jaren,
Mm-hmm.
they were kind of side characters, but you really brought them all to life. Who was your favorite one to write?
Simon, I loved writing Simon. He was. I mean, Simon is very much almost a replica of my kids at that age.
Okay.
So that was always fun to write him and all of his weirdo nonsense and the stuff he was screaming all the time. That was always a lot. That was a blast. Other than that, though, I mean, I did like writing Wanda's descent into madness. I also liked writing Cynthia. Um,
I liked her a
yeah, she
lot.
was a
I
lot of
liked her a
fun.
lot. I feel like I was like,
Yeah, I had friends
she, she
I had friends in college who were very much like her, so that was always, she was a blast to write. God, I'm thinking. I mean, I really did like writing most of the characters, but Cynthia was fun, Simon was fun, and Wanda, just as the main character, was interesting to write. I don't know if she was fun to write. There were moments that were fun to write that were like just twisted jokes that I wrote in there, and I'm like, I shouldn't be writing this, but it's kind of funny, so I just ran with it, and that was great.
that was her descent was so perfectly done, in my opinion. I loved how she justified certain things in her head that a normal functioning adult would just never cross their mind, and her just making it just the most normal thing ever was fantastic. Like, it was just the way you did it was such a smooth transition that it never felt like there was a struggle there.
Cool, thank you. It was tough,
Yeah.
you have to make sure it's subtle enough that it's not over the top. Like, you're doing justice to the idea of mental illness, that you're not demonizing it, but at the same time you're not making it seem funny or ridiculous. It's a serious issue, and it needs to be dealt with seriously. And it's also not a flip of the switch sort of thing. It's not an
Yeah.
immediate thing. It's a gradual thing that just keeps rolling down the mountain and turning into an avalanche. And this book's a lot about the dangers of basically enabling that kind of descent, and not standing up when you have a chance to be like, whoa, this has gone too far.
I really hope that at some point, I know you have a bajillion projects going
Yeah.
on, which for everybody watching, I was lucky enough to have some information on his upcoming projects and got to read some of it. And oh my God, I was hooked right away, and I can't wait for it. Honestly, I messaged JP right off the bat and was like, I'm going to need the rest of this right now. It was very good, and it's going to be huge. It's going to be a
I
big
hope
deal.
so. I'm definitely excited about it. I already sent the 50 pages out to an agent, so I'm hoping to hear back on that. And in the meantime, I'm finalizing a lot of the edits on the rest of the book. And when I'm done with my edits and my slashing it apart and cutting out all the stuff that I don't need to have there, I'll compile it, because I use Scrivener, so I'll compile it over into Word, run it through Word again, and just double check some stuff, make sure that the formatting's solid, and then I'll probably turn it into a PDF, save it as a PDF, and send it out to a few people and figure it out. So yeah, you'll probably get a copy. The people who won any of the contests and the giveaways, they'll get copies, and a couple of my go-to beta readers, if they have time, will get copies. And I'm like slowly using this book to create like a small group of beta readers, which honestly kind of interesting because I'm taking a group of horror enthusiasts and having them beta read a YA fantasy and kind of seeing how it goes. And if everyone
Um,
likes it, then great. I mean, it's like, oh, great, I did a good job of just writing a good story, not just writing a good horror story.
there were parts though that were actually quite terrifying. So, I mean, I think that yes, it's YA, but putting yourself in that position, I don't know how you write kids so well because you do. You write kids
Because I am a
fantastic.
reluctant
And
adult. That is how I write kids so well. I am not I am not an adult person.
you write them perfectly. And because I even liked, even in Portrait, I even liked Nathan's character. As hard as that would be to have a child like that, I felt for him. I felt like his parents, he just wasn't seen. It was all focused on Simon. And as, because, there had to have been signs prior to him, just going straight for full brutality on the animals. There was signs of neglect, especially with the two scenes that involved mom and grandma. um, Clearly Nathan was a normal child at some point.
Yes.
And I think that Wanda's influence was detrimental in his mental health as he got older.
Yes. Yeah, there was a lot. So Wanda obviously is an emotionally abusive character, at least towards Nathan.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, tell us more about." And by the way, Tara commented, "I love the story. I don't have kiddos, but it was very conflicting. Wondering what I would do in the mom's shoes." That was basically the premise of the book was what would I do in those shoes, but then add a bunch of mental illness and go crazy, and turn it into a straight up horror book. But uh, yeah, Nathan started out as a normal kid, but Wanda's kind of brutal to the kid, treated him really bad, had a mental breakdown, which you get kind of pictures of that during from like the interludes, and her versions
Yeah.
of it as they progressively get worse until the mom at the very end is like, none of that happened the way you remember it, this is what happened, and kind of alludes to, you went off the friggin' handle and you lost your damn mind, and the only reason you're not in jail is because your husband stopped us from turning you in.
Yes.
The So Nathan, yeah, he was abused mentally and emotionally for years, and he became very controlled, very analytical, and became kind of a sociopath, just trying to function the way that would avoid his mom's wrath. And
That and
yeah, and then it just went south.
you conveyed that so well though that you never really, there wasn't a lot of questions. I know I reached out to you a few times while reading it, what about this, what about that, but you conveyed his hurt as a child to where he's obviously, in the beginning the main, villain, I guess, for lack of a better term. But throughout the rest of the story and Wanda's story, even though Nathan's not a big part of it, you felt for him. You felt bad. There wasn't like this, oh, this violent, awful kid. You felt sad for him. And that Simon was the one that got all the love, got all the attention, where it was just Nathan just did everything wrong. And she jumped into it. That I actually really enjoyed enjoyed that part of it. How did you write Charles? Like, what was, because I was through the whole thing and I'm like, what is wrong with this guy?
um, I did a couple different things. God, what did I do? So the first couple times I wrote it, people commented a lot on, readers would comment a lot on like, oh, Charles wouldn't do this, and why is he doing that? And everyone was really like confused about his character. Every time I rewrote it, I tried to kind of turn him more and more into a milquetoast character of a milquetoast husband who's just under under her heel and just constantly
Yeah.
trying to not enrage her because he basically lived in fear of her. And I knew that was a really hard thing to convey because most people don't view uh, a abusive relationship from the woman's point of view. Everyone's always like the men are going to always be abusive, and the men will always be able to deal with an abusive wife in some way. Deal. But the reality is that's not always the case, and there are numerous cases of the women in the relationship being the aggressor and the abuser, and the husband just being beaten down over time. And that was the case in this. So it was very much her trying. It was very much in the very beginning me trying to show that they kind of had an equal footing, but then slowly over time you see Wanda start building up and kind of realizing that Charles is just trying to survive this. He's
Yes.
stuck in a relationship that he doesn't necessarily want to be in.
That came across really well for me. I thought that, and it made me really want to have like a prequel story on what her childhood was like growing up and her kind of descent into adulthood and how she got her hooks into him to make him that way prior to having Nathan and
Yeah,
Simon.
I mean,
Because
maybe one
such a good story.
day. Like, I'd have to figure
No,
out.
I know you're crazy
Hmm?
busy. I know you're crazy busy.
It's not even that.
I know
It's
you're
just I
crazy
have
busy.
to figure out a way to do that that would be entertaining. Um, and interesting because for me, if it's not going to be fun and entertaining to write, it's not going to be fun and entertaining to read. I've got a couple ideas of how to do it, but ultimately, it's it would be difficult because you have Wanda, who is a unreliable narrator who sees things through her perception of she's the victim all the time, and then you're trying to convey, what actually happened, and maybe it starts out as her being the victim of her mom's strict, way of living her life, but then when she gets to college, she starts kind of exerting some level of control, gets a hold of Charles, exerts more control, and then slowly builds through. But it would not be it wouldn't be so much of a horror story as more of like a character development kind of thing, or it would just be like it would be like an exploration of a character of a person. So it would definitely be a slightly different kind of book because she wasn't killing people, she was just being manipulative as hell.
I mean, but do we know that she didn't kill anybody prior?
um as far as my brain goes, no. She wasn't running around slicing people up and being crazy. She was very damaged and manipulative,
What about
but she wasn't
what
killing
about
people.
her? Well, has she could, maybe ruining somebody's life to make them do it to
Oh yeah, no,
themselves
she'll
because
definitely
of her
be somebody who
manipulation?
would be like cyberbullying 100%, and like ruining lives. Anyone who crossed her, she'd be
She,
like, "I'm the alpha, take it." So there's aspects of that.
there's definite some history there. I want. It's so weird because I'm like, I want to know her history. It hasn't even been written yet, and I'm like, I want to
Yeah,
know. She was amazing. She's an amazing character. It as hard as that is to say because she's crazy, but her dissent, her logic with things, because she clearly had a lot of love in her,
yeah,
and her feelings towards her father, her feelings towards Simon, even the times after Charles met his demise, and she's rebuilding her family. Um, and there was a certain scene that was alluded to in there of some of her thoughts on continuing her happy, intimate
yeah.
marriage, that she obviously still had the love there for her husband. So that I thought was such an incredible aspect of her character that you added in, that she still had that. She didn't just go crazy. It wasn't just this serial killer out killing a taxidermist and, a Jehovah Witness and all of that. She and her best friend, she actually still had a lot of love and care. She set Cindy and Jaron together at the dinner table because she thought that they would be happy together and they looked happy together. And she wanted that for two people that she cared about. I was very impressed on you adding that into her character because I feel that with mental illness, there's still those parts of you that have that love, that compassion, that care for the ones that are closest to you.
Yeah. Um, let's see here. We got Tara. In the beginning, I wanted to shake Charles. Halfway through the book, I wanted to shake Wanda. Yeah, that's accurate. Um,
Thank you.
let's see here. I want to know how Marjorie affected Wanda's life as a child, young adult. So, throughout the book, there are allusions to things that she did. So, there'll be, my mom used to quote the Bible at me. Godliness is next to cleanliness. Things like that. A lot of Bible quotes throughout her life, and a lot of like aphorisms that were very much like, you have to be orderly, you have to be clean, you have to be measured. And then her mom was also very much like, I'm the master of the house. I am the master of this house. Your father goes out and works, makes money, comes home. When you're home, I'm in charge. So even her dad was very much under her mom's, or under Marjorie's thumb. So that's kind of how she viewed relationships going into Charles, into her marriage. So that's kind of why Nathan, the first kid, is just pounded on until Simon comes along. And this was just kind of a thing that I noticed with having two kids, is the first kid, almost every parent on their first child is like, I'm going to do this so freaking perfectly. Everything's going to be amazing. Everything's going to be perfect. I'm going to limit screen time. You get to the second kid, you're like, I don't care anymore. Like, I used to joke that I did not raise my children. PBS kids raised my children, because you just get so tired. You're like, PBS kids, go. And I was just like, my kids were raised by wolves. The fact that they are as kind and considerate and lovable as they are has more to do with PBS kids and my wife than me being a stay-at-home dad, because I'm just like, guys, please let me work. Just tell me when you're hungry. I'll make you food, but for the love of God, let me work. So it just, you get to the point, and so now it's like I have a router that specifically turns on and off their computers, so I can limit their screen time between certain hours. So from 12 to like
I think
7, they have access to computers, but outside of that, that's it. And God help me, and they just go onto the computer. And I would love to limit it, but I would never get any work done if I didn't. I would love to limit it further, but I would never get any work done.
I still think though that you are obviously clearly very active with them because you write children so well.
Yeah.
So if you weren't such a big, you wouldn't be able to write them so perfectly. I know that Billy isn't a character in Portrait, but hands down was written incredibly, like absolutely incredibly. I was so impressed. And that's his new book that he's working on, you guys, currently, if you're not familiar with it. When it comes out, you need to be. It is absolutely amazing.
It's the new
He
book
said
I'm working on
it's a
is
YA, but I don't.
yeah, the new book I'm working on is
Will you
currently
say
entitled the Parables of Avarath, the Chosen. The Chosen part is probably going to change, just because that was just a placeholder. I couldn't think of a better thing at the time. It's gone through a number of title changes, to be honest. And then and the Billy is the main character. He's a 13, 14-year-old kid whose mother had passed away a few years ago, and his dad has remarried. His stepmom is now pregnant, and the kid's feeling replaced. And he's lonely and angry. And a lot of the stuff that Billy's feeling, not the same situations, but a lot of the emotions he's feeling are very similar to the stuff I felt as a kid at his age. So it's not an exact, my mom is still alive. My dad didn't get remarried. I do not have a half sibling. But that feeling of loneliness and being lost and being replaceable is something I definitely went through at that age. So it was very easy to create that character and plug those feelings in, because this is very much what I went through as a kid. So outside of, slipping through reality and ending up in some weirdo Narnia-like world, but that was very much like when I was a kid, I very much wanted that to happen. So this is kind of like what would have happened, and, and then I have another character in there, Miranda, who you read, is a girl who's 12, who's a 12-year-old body of a girl, but she's been stuck around for 60 years. So she's a 60-year-old woman blind woman who is stuck in a 12-year-old body who has survived for the last 60 years
It's
stuck
so
in a mall being hunted by these angelic beings. So she's kind of hard. She's hardcore. The girl can survive and can manage. So these are your two main characters, and they're now in Avarath, and they have to figure it out. They got to get home.
It's fantastic the way you wrote her though, because there's still that childlikeness in her because she didn't get to grow up around, and actually mature. So you still pick up that little bits of
Yeah.
immaturity, but with her, she handles situations is also, you can see her age, and how she doesn't freak out over things and how she's like, no, this is how it needs to be done. Like I said, your portrayal of children is absolutely incredible, better than probably anybody I've ever read with the way you write
Thank you.
kids.
Again, it's because I
Um,
refuse to grow
and
up. I am a giant child. There's no way around that. Like I when I was at Yale,
that's no,
people
it's
kept
a good thing.
saying like when I told them how old I was, I'm 43. People were like, "What? What?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm old." And they're just like, "You don't act it." I'm like, "Nope. I am the
That's a good thing,
I
though.
do not act."
It's always going to help you
Yeah,
writing.
I have never really saw the point in growing up, so I just refuse.
That's good. Stay
I
that
just
way
don't.
because it definitely comes through in your
Yeah.
writing. So you said it's not a horror. It's not geared to be a horror, but the characters of mother and
Yeah.
father are flipping terrifying. Okay, so they scared the daylights out of me. I'm reading it and I was like, what is, I want to know their story. Obviously, I messaged you right away. I want to read more of them. That that was actually very scary. Like that, those characters were very, very, very
It gets
terrifying.
worse.
And
It gets so much worse.
okay, so see,
They're the horror.
it is a
That's the
horror.
horror
It is
part of the book
a type
is
of
mother and father. Yeah, it's these
horror. Okay,
two grandparently people. One basically is supposed to look like Mark Twain. The other one is basically supposed to
okay,
look like Betsy Ross. And
okay.
they're pretty dark. They've been there for a really long time. They've been in power for a really long time, and they're very they believe in what they're doing. They believe that they're bringing progress to Avarath, that they are dragging this backwards world into the future. And anything like that is always dangerous. So they're true believers, and they will stop at nothing to get what they want. Um, and they have more access to the history, the knowledge, and the power of Avarath than anyone else in the world. So they're powerhouses. They're going to be hard. They're tough. You as you go through the book, you're going to see like these guys are jacked. They're ready for pretty much anything.
It you could definitely tell that. I just, the way you write characters is absolutely amazing to me because you actually feel like they're real people. With Wanda, I actually felt like she was real. Her friendship with Cindy was real. Jaren was a real teacher at a school because as you're reading about them, you relate these characters to people that you know.
Yep.
And that is what I find one of the best aspects of your storytelling is that you can think about, it's your mailman, it's your, the lady that works at the grocery store, it's the teacher, at your kid's school. They remind you of
Yeah.
somebody. And I really like that, especially Wanda, the mom, the overprotective mom. I think all of us know those helicopter mothers who are constantly, with their kids. Wanda was definitely like that. It was Simon, unfortunately not Nathan. But I have to ask, the out of all the scenes in Portrait, which one was the hardest to write?
Um. While I'm thinking about that, I got another comment. It said, "New book sounds amazing. Has it already been released, or when is it set to be released?" Oh, if it had been released, I guarantee you, I would be pushing it like like just so hard. I'm not shy about pushing my stuff.
Because everyone needs to read it.
Yeah,
It's so good.
is set to release? I don't know because I'm going through the final edits now. I just sent the first 50 pages to an agent. I'm hoping it gets picked up. If it gets picked up by an agent and goes through, so here's a little peek into the behind the curtain of publishing. If it gets picked up by an agent and gets picked up by one of the big four publishers, it will not be released until 2025 because it takes about 18 months to 2 years for any book to get published from when it's accepted. It's a very long process. If I self-publish it, I can knock it out in a far less time, but then I don't get the marketing, I don't get the push, so it doesn't sell as many copies. There's a kind of a give and take there. So Avarath, if it gets accepted, won't come out for a couple years, 12 months if I go through a small publisher maybe. But I will be working on the sequel because that is absolutely made to be a series. I've already got 7 books planned for that. Yeah, 7. There's like 7-ish books planned for that series, kind of, and they're very Narnia. So each book takes place about 100 years apart from the previous or next book or whatever. So the world's going to change drastically from book to book. But then once I have it out, I'll be pumping them out behind the scenes. So hopefully the plan would be a new book would come out once a year, once every 18 months, something in that area. I write pretty quick once I know somebody wants something. Once I have kind of a deadline, I don't like knowing the deadline, but if you tell me like people are waiting for this, I'll be like, okay, and I'll start working really fast. So once I get that going, that book series will be pretty steady till it's done. So yeah, so like once it starts, you'll get the books pretty quick. I'm sorry, what was what was the question you asked right before I went onto that little diatribe?
With Wanda, we were talking. Oh, your favorite, the hardest
Scene.
scene to write in Portrait.
Oh God, you know what? I don't know. Oh, you know what? Yeah, the hardest scene, weirdly, was Wanda and Charles's argument in the garage.
Oh, okay.
Because my wife and I, it's a running joke with my friend Heather Straub, who helped edit the book. She had a running joke where she was reading it, and like the first time I wrote that scene, she was like, "This is not how people argue," and I'm like, "I don't know," and she was like, "Do you ever argue with your wife?" I'm like, "Not really, no," and we don't really have arguments, not like that. And she's like, "I will fix this." So she went in and she helped me kind of like move things around and was like, "People don't say this, cut that, do this," and I was like, "Okay," and then I rewrote it and I pared it down quite a bit, and she was like, "That's way better," and I was like, "Okay." That was a tough scene. Anything like that was really hard for me to write just because it was so outside of my experience that I was like, I don't know how people do this. Yeah. But yeah. Like the scene in the woods, that was actually taken from true stories I heard from things people did during the Depression, like literally did, to animals, because in the Depression, kids were poor and needed entertainment, and apparently the hungry stray cats and dogs were their entertainment. The Depression made people insane. It was a wild. So like a lot of that stuff that happened in the woods when Wanda first goes in there, all of that is pulled from stories that I heard from my grandfather about what kids did in like the Philadelphia area and South Jersey area during the Depression times, because they had nothing better to do. And it haunted him. He haunted him for years. And I was like, this is kind of wild. And when I started writing the book, I was like, well, I know what happened in the woods, because it's some wild crap. That wasn't hard because it was just me basically relating a lot of stuff. And then the taxidermy wasn't that hard because, again, and it's funny because I think this is what affects people more, is that I didn't write it to be over the top. I wrote it to be very clinical and just, this is what's happening. And I think for a lot of people that messed them up more, because I didn't make it farcical. I didn't make it so over the top that it kind of became funny. I kept it very grounded in the reality of what this person's doing and what is happening here. And I think that messed people up more than if I had just been really nutty about it.
I think my favorite comical scene was how the beef jerky, like she just grabs this piece of jerky, like it was just no big deal. I'm just eating human, whatever. That made me laugh. Like I chuckled at that one because of that. Like okay. That just, I loved that scene. That stood out to me.
Yeah. I'm not even trying to pronounce that name. I want to know what would have been found on Nathan's laptop had the cops cracked it.
Ooh, good question.
So honestly, Nathan is a smart kid, and I think he was very protective of his stuff. And in my brain, Nathan's computer, had you cracked it forcefully, there would have been a lot of viruses on it that would have just corrupted the whole hard drive. So the kid would have had a backup plan that didn't allow for anybody to get into that computer without destroying everything in it so that nothing was in there that he would have seen. But ultimately, anything what was in the computer were journal entries of, so in the notebooks it was mostly pictures and diagrams. In the computer were the journal entries of where he detailed his experiments and where he wrote up his reports basically. So they would have just, had they somehow gotten into it and seen what he was writing, it would have just been a very scientific clinical journal of all the stuff he did, all the experiments, and the results of said experiments, with reference to each notebook and what was found in there for like cross reference. That's what you would have found in the laptop. It was a lot of crazy, insane, kind of Mengele esque reports about things he did to animals in his studies.
He was a very smart kid.
Yeah, I mean, if your kids, today's day and age, if your kid is left alone to their own devices and they're staying quiet and they're staying out of the way, the internet is a wonderful, wildly dangerous tool, and you can learn a lot just sitting on the computer and just learning and getting your Google game up. If you can use the Google search engine correctly, it's pretty powerful, and you can find a lot of crazy information on there and learn a ton. I mean, you can go on YouTube and watch surgery videos. It's kind of wild. I learned everything I needed to know about taxidermy through YouTube and Wikipedia and connected articles, and just clicking through links and watching and reading articles, watching YouTube, and figuring it out. And I mean, I know way more about taxidermy than I've ever wanted to know. So yeah,
Well,
Google's a little, like, Google's intense if you like deep dive into it. And you find a lot of stuff. Hey, Matt made it. I'm so sorry, guys, and for everybody who's here now, I'm so sorry for this mess up. Part of it was my fault. We were ready at like 6:50, and
yeah.
then when we started the thing, I kept hitting the button and it wouldn't start the stupid video, and I forgot that I needed to be linked through uh, uh, Chrome and not Safari for YouTube videos. So that was totally my fault. Can you imagine if Nathan grew up and discovered the dark web? Yeah, he would have, had I know how to do it. If I could have figured out how to discover the dark web, it would have been in the book. But I was like, I don't know enough about this. So yeah, I just didn't do it. God help us all had I figured that out. This book would have gone completely off the rails. Far worse than it did. Oh yeah, so you were talking about the cooking
I you
thing. I happened to be watching
Yes.
through the, both the seasons of Hannibal, and I thought the scenes where he's like doing this gourmet cooking were really interesting and powerful, and kind of like, it was I like cooking shows and I like to cook. So watching him use human body parts in his recipes was, it was kind of like, wow, this is really interesting to see, and see how he figured out how to like mix the stuff to get the flavor profiles he wanted with meat that wasn't, used normally in cuisine. So because of that, I was like, well, I'm gonna have a cooking scene because I like to cook and I like to figure this stuff out. So I was like, let me look, and yeah, again, Google, let me look up what human meat tastes like. That's on the internet. You can
I remember
find it.
asking you that. I remember messaging you going, "How'd you
Look
know?"
it up.
Like,
You can look it up.
yep.
There are tribes in Africa that eat human flesh, and there are anthropologists who hung out with those tribes and wrote books about it. So it's pretty. It wasn't that hard to find. The same thing about information on human taxidermy. It's been practiced for centuries. It wasn't that hard to find. it's
All right. So there is one scene though I that you alluded to with Wanda and Charles, and I'm so curious as to why you didn't add it.
oh god, did I tell you what that scene was? I
Yes, yes,
did.
you did.
Okay.
I want to know why.
Yeah, I did
Yes.
promise I would tell everybody what this what your recipe is very close. Thank you, Matt. By the way, he said I can tell you how you might not. Oh, so I'm sorry. I can tell you how to find the dark web, but you might not want to. I don't. I don't. I'm good. Thank you, though. Yeah. Okay. So
Okay, I want to meet that. Let me.
yeah. Okay. Oh God, help us all for this one. All right. So I was talking to a friend, and we were just BSing, and I was talking about the book, and at the time we were discussing. He was like, how we were talking about like taxidermy and how crazy it was, and I was like, yeah, it's really weird. Like you have to use forms, and you take the skin and you put it on the form. And he was like, "Oh, well, and you can buy crazy forms. You can buy growling bears and all types of crazy stuff, but obviously you can't buy human forms." And he was like, "So how are you gonna do that?" It's like, "Oh, well, I figured out like you can buy mannequins, and they're essentially the same thing." And he's like, "Oh, that's really smart." I was like, "Yeah, so I'm doing that whole thing." And then he was like, "Okay, but," and then he said, "Well, wait a minute. There's like nothing down there with mannequins." And I went, "You're right." And then I laughed and I said, "You know what? You know how mannequins have six packs?" And they go, "Yeah." It's like, well, so when you taxidermy, the skin shrinks. So technically, when she starts putting the flesh onto the mannequin, Charles is going to have a six pack. How messed up would it be if I had a scene where she got turned on by Charles, then got a vibrator or sex toy, and then put his penis on that sex toy and attached it, or strap on it and attached it to the form, to the body, and then had sex with her taxidermied husband. And we laughed because we're sick people. And I went in and I got to the scene, and if you read the book, I guarantee you, you will nail exactly when I had that scene coming up. And I got to it, I wrote it, and I went, "This is so screwed up." I was like, "This is dark. This is way darker than I wanted it to go." And also, it was both dark and comical, and I was like, "This doesn't fit. The tone does not fit for the overall story." It was just so wild that I was like, "This is too much. Like this just pushed it over the
Do you
edge."
still have it?
And I was like, "All right, no, this has got to come out." So I just ripped the chunk of it out and went, "Nope," and tossed it aside.
Do you still have it though? Do you still have it
No,
like
no,
saved
no. I
somewhere?
actually don't save stuff. I generally delete everything because I delete a lot of stuff because I call I have what's called an what, instead of doing like the rough draft, I have an alpha draft. And my alpha drafts are the
Mm-hmm.
things that I think are so bad that I will immediately delete them. If they are printed on paper, I will shred the paper and burn the shreds and bury the ashes because they can never be seen. They're so bad. That was like,
And I
this
want to
is
read
messed
that
up.
scene so
What
bad.
was that?
I was hoping you still had it. I want to read
No,
that scene so
it was
bad.
just, it was so stupid. That was the problem. It just read so dumb. I was like, no, no, this can't stay in the book. Like this is so beyond ridiculous. This can't stay. So I was like, nope, nope. The thing is that kind of stuff is not my strength in writing. I'm not good at writing any kind of sex scene, let alone a necrophiliac one. And I went, no, this has got to go.
I was sure. I was sure that was coming. Like I was like, that's what's
It,
next. Like
it was.
that part that you got to talking about. I was like, that's coming. That's what's coming here. And it didn't. And I was surprised. I remember messaging you going, what happened? Like I thought this was coming, and you told me, about the scene and everything. So it was. Yeah, that was the one thing though. But I honestly, I'm so torn on it being left out or not because she was nuts, and it would have been fun to see how like the depth she really went to with it. But on the same hand, yeah, I could see it being
It
comical.
kind of went down the lane of
And
comical, and I was like, that's not the tone of this book. And like, and my intent on the book was to constantly ratchet up the tension, and that did not do it. There was no tension there. That was just straight up like, what the hell is going on? I saved my one joke for the very end of It's Bone In. And that
I
made me
know.
laugh whenever I
I
read it,
love
and I was
that.
like, that's got to stay because that was at the very end. We got some comments here. It says, "Was the original? Oh, this is booze, books, booze, and horror reviews. I love you guys. Let's see here. So the original CPS case really unfounded. Was that the catalyst for changing Nathan to who he was? No, the original CPS case was not unfounded. There was an incident on that I think it was a Thanksgiving. I'd have to go back and check. But there was an incident during that dinner, during the interludes, that she absolutely lost her mind, threatened Nathan, threatened the family, even threatened Simon. Like, she just lost her mind. It was like her first major breakdown. Um, but the mom wanted to turn her in. The dad, the grandfather, the mom's Wanda's father, was kind of like, he kind of stayed out of it because he's just doesn't get involved in anything like that. And Charles was kind of terrified that if Marjorie kept pushing the issue that night or at all, Wanda would just go off the handle even further and actually harm somebody, because even when CPS is called, it takes them a really, really long time to actually do anything. There's investigations and stuff like that. Sometimes, if it's certain things, they'll pull the kids out. But in the meantime, I think Charles was afraid that before that happened, Wanda would just follow through with the crazy. So it was better to diffuse the situation. And he was scared of what would happen to the kids. Because had CPS found anything bad, they would have taken the kids from him as well. And he was a little terrified of that. So he helped cover it up. And then they used a lawyer to get it sealed. And yeah, so was that the catalyst that changed Nathan? No, that was a series of things. That was years and years of emotional and psychological abuse on the part of Wanda. That wasn't just that one incident. It was a lot of stuff. But that was the incident that set off the CPS case and showed that Wanda had a history of mental breakdowns. Yes, everybody knows exactly where that was. I'm telling you, it's pretty obvious where it was heading in that. I thought that was where it seemed was going for a sec. It was going there for a second.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need blueprints for the taxidermy vibrator. No, I don't have those. But I guarantee you, if you go look
Come
up
on.
taxidermy, you'll figure it out. It's really not complicated.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So I'm gonna have to jump off here in just a moment. I have an appointment because this we've been going for an hour and a half, which is awesome. I think that's great. I mean, you can really go all. There is this book, even though it's not super long, has so much depth with each character and each scene that you could really, I mean, talk about it for hours. The one thing that I have heard that I've read on reviews is that why did it take them so long to come and arrest her, basically, or show up at the house? And I think actually that was the one of the most accurate depictions in the entire book, because they don't just come and arrest you. They had nothing. There was no evidence. Yeah, she was doing crazy shit and she was acting weird, but they really legitimately had nothing against her to come and arrest her. So I thought the fact that it was a year later was very realistic for our judicial
I
system.
did a ton of research. So I did research into missing persons and how that's investigated. And I did research into like when there's suspected murder and foul play and all of that. And yeah, it's a little like, honestly, I definitely took some liberties with it, but not a ton. It takes a really long time for all of that to go through the process. And I tried to set it up that Wanda did a passable job of not leaving behind enough evidence to create immediate suspicion. So they were the police were definitely focused, and the community was definitely focused on the concept of these children ran away, and everybody knew Nathan had already had kind of a history of acting a little weird in school, so that was a known issue. So they ran after that first and wasted a lot of investigative time on pursuing Nathan and trying to figure out where he disappeared to. So yeah, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people said that would have never lasted that long. I'm, well, no, it totally would have. Actually, I kind of sped it up for a
Yes,
little
it,
bit. I played with the timeline a little bit, but not a ton.
no, I think that was the most realistic, besides the way you write kids, which is perfect, but that was the most realistic aspect of the storyline itself to me. So was that, yeah, they can't just come and arrest you. And when I think a couple reviews I saw, people that I have recommended the book to have said, well, they'd find her fingerprints in the taxidermist. Yes, and they run them through CODIS, but it still takes time to get those results back. You don't get those necessarily next week or next month even. There's a ton of FBI cases going on at all times. There is usually a delay. I thought that was perfect that year. I was like, that's about accurate. I think that actually was done very, very well. And through the whole timeline, that was perfect to me, I thought. And the fact that it happened on Christmas again. But I'm going to have to jump off here. I do have an appointment, but I absolutely, now that we got this working, we need to do this again because there needs to be more talked about, along with your upcoming shows, and you being at AuthorCon, which you guys is so exciting. I don't know if you know that he is going. He is going to be there. I can't wait to meet him in person. Hopefully there'll be more info by then on the parables of Avroth, because I can't wait for this.
Well, yeah, definitely do this again. Like I said, I've been planning on possibly putting something like this together on a monthly basis. So now that I've kind of worked out some of the issues, I'll get better at this, and we'll start on time and all that other fun nonsense. So definitely keep an eye out.
Well, the group going. This isn't, so we're going to probably change the name. Yeah, we're going to change the name of it. It's not going to be just the group rediscussion book for the Brawl. We're going to keep this this Facebook page open. We want to continue following JP and what he's doing and his stories, and talking to him a lot more, and delving a little bit deeper into his brain on what he's thinking with his characters when he writes them, because they're amazing.
Anything, ask. I'll answer pretty much everything. If you guys want to talk about writers' workshops, I've got opinions because I've been to a couple now. So, guys, come and hit me with the questions. And yeah, like I said, we'll do this again next month. I'm gonna figure out how to edit this video, and then I'm gonna post it on the channel. Make sure you follow the channel, hit the like button, all that fun noise, and I will get better at putting these things on and doing it on time and all that fun stuff.
I'm going to create a post, you guys. It's going to be pinned to the top of the page, where you can give us suggestions on topics you want to talk about. Different things that you've noticed with Portrait, different similarities. It can be his upcoming projects. It can be, anything you want to know, where he's going to be, just stuff you want to talk about. So then when we do our next live, we can discuss all of those things and address them. And hopefully you guys will be there, and it'll be a nice, smooth transition.
And then as I get even better at this, hopefully I'll be able to do interviews with some of my other writer friends.
That would be a lot of fun.
Yep.
That would be a lot of fun. That would be really fun. All right, guys, I'm going to jump off here. JP, if you want to keep going, that's fine. I just got to get to an appointment. Thank you guys so much for coming. Sorry it took us a little bit to get it going. Yeah, it's okay. I blame Faith's book, honestly. I think it's their fault. So, all right, you guys, I'm going to jump off. Have a good night.
See you later.
See you soon.
So, let's see here. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming out. Thank you for dealing with all the craziness. Again, I am going to try and do this once a month. Let me look at my schedule. I'll even tell you when next month I'm looking at doing this. Once I figure out how to make my calendar work properly. So it's looking like maybe, let me see here, July 15th. What's going on? I got nothing going on July 15th, and my wife's home from work. So we can try to do this again on July 15th if that works for everybody. Roughly around the same time, maybe a little earlier, maybe at 6. I don't know. But yeah, so try to hit me back. We'll be on the Facebook page. I'll talk about it there. Once I really lock this down, I'll definitely put it on my website. So keep an eye on the website. Keep an eye on the Facebook group. Keep an eye on my Facebook page, my author page. I will do my best to keep this updated constantly. And I'll even try to start posting on the Instagram. I'm still really bad at Instagram. I'm old. I'm sorry. But yeah, and then again, if you guys have questions about process, writers' workshops, publishing, anything, I'm more than happy to talk about it. If I don't know the answer, I will be open about not knowing the answer, and I will even, if you ask me ahead of time, I'll try to research it and bring it up the following time. So I want to try to make these videos like once a month, and hopefully, like again, if I get really good at it, I'll have more interviews. I'll bring more people on, and we'll see how that goes. Thank you again for everyone coming out. I hope it was not too painful and it was interesting. And I apologize for the mess up in the beginning of this. It was very, very complicated and annoying, and that was mostly my fault. So thank you guys again, and I will see you. I'll talk to you online, and I'll see you later. Thanks.